Section 8.
I want a Section 8.
I want a Section 8 as well.
It's meditation. Okay? My fault.
Section 8.
Yeah, it is your fault. All right, so now for being an event part Badiou.
Still in part 2.
Well-loaded camel.
Part Badiou. So basically what we've got is we've got these different characterizations of multiplicities. So just as a side note, it's interesting here where Badiou responds to Heidegger. And what he talks about is Heidegger's use of care as an attempt to ward off the void, right, or the nothing in Heideggerian terms, right, where one's focus and attention on particular objects or instruments, allows one to focus in itself and its own most. But of course, right, the upshot for Badiou is the void is not this singular element, but rather an omnipresent errancy. So we get a lot of really interesting stuff here. So in 94 and 95, Badiou makes this interesting point, is that to our appearance, there is no void, right, in our everyday experience of the world. And so what he says is that all presentation must be structured doubly to avoid any fixation of the void. And this entails every representation has a buried presentation underneath haunting it. So this double structure ensures that a presentation without gaps and this secondary structure becomes a, quote, one that structures the multiple. So basically what happens is, as we've talked earlier before, is all of these elements of a situation that are not also included in the situation drop out, right? And that happens for the first power set, right, the structure of it, and this also occurs in the second power set, right, the metastructure. Well, this is what he means. It's not just a figurative haunting, in the sort of Heideggerian or, Derridian, sort of imposition. What it is there's actual elements that are present in the situation that no longer make manifest, right? And these can be key elements of the situation, which then, render something off about the structure of the situation, right? The representation.
Inconsistency.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing, is there's not necessarily an inconsistency. I mean, that's the very point of the power set, right? Is that it gets rid of those inconsistencies. But by getting rid of those inconsistencies, those elements that have been gotten rid of then become, right, this sort of haunting.
Would it be incorrect to sort of interpret this on the Lacanian perspective of the real itself, right? The real is still present, but it's not represented symbolically or imaginary. In a sense, but it still is structured. It still has this sort of imposition on those various.
Well, no, actually, I mean, this is a small.
Is this a break from that? Or?
It is a break from that, and the reason why is because through set theory, those elements don't.
They can be known, but.
No, I mean, because there's no magical. What's the connection between sets?
Nothing.
Only elements.
Okay.
Right? Does that make sense? That's the foundational primitive relation.
Sure.
So if you have an element in the situation that is not in the state of the situation, what is the relation between those two, that missing element? None, right? So this is a little bit of a break with the Lacanian real. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But this is again.
I don't want to crutch it, but.
Yeah, this is a way to crutch it for a little bit, right? This is a sort of imaginary way in which you can formulate it, but you need to understand that fundamental difference.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I mean, he's also bringing up certain things like chaos, and he also talks about the anxiety to avoid. Do you want to talk about those a little bit?
Sure.
So, chaos is first brought up. It's on the 93 where he says, evidently the guarantee of consistency that there is oneness cannot rely on structure, or the count as one alone to circumscribe and prohibit the errancy of the void from fixing itself, and being on the basis of the very fact, as presentation, the unpresentable, the ruin of every donation of the being in the figure subjacent to chaos.
So, okay, remember when we were talking earlier, unlike political society, as we'll see in the, I believe, next meditation, there is no state which, in ontology, that can account for the void, right? The void still occurs in the parts, in the power set, in the excess between the situation and the state, right? Does that make sense? We were talking about earlier. Everyone understands, on the same page, right? That there's a fundamental break between the situation, right, and the elements, and the power set. Just like we were talking about just a second ago, right? Elements in the situation not necessarily appear in the state, right? We'll call the power set the state from now on. Okay, so this becomes a point of excess. Does that make sense? Okay, well, this is the very point of that. That point of excess, right, reintroduces the danger of the void, right, especially between the difference of the two, which we'll get later. And because ontology has no recourse to any quote-unquote something, ontology in and of itself can't deal with this alone through just the state, right, through just the structure. So what does it need? It needs something else. And what structure? What does it need above and beyond structure? Metastructure, right? State of the state.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
The structure of the structure is called the state.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, like, we should be very clear with the terminology.
Yeah.
The state is the thing that allows there to be a consistency
in the situation.
in the structure. The situation itself is, it happens before. So it almost might even be considered a sort of Hegelian move, or a sort of ability to negate the void, right? Where you have the situation, right? You have multiplicities of multiplicities that aren't structured, no axioms. Then you have the structure. The structure brings the axioms, but the axioms still leave the void there. And so what happens is they need the state to create a unicity.
I think in this case you're mistaken.
Well, actually, wouldn't it be the problem with the Hegelian readers, the fact that, right, you have a structure, you have your metastructure, but then you stop to account for the excesses of metastructure with the metastructure ad nauseum.
Right. I mean that's actually the point, because the axioms themselves don't appear. They don't appear in set theory itself, right? They're the conditions for set theory, and so it's not the axioms that run into problems. It's what follows from those axioms. And so, yeah, I mean, I am kind of using it a little loose, right? We could have the situation, and then we could have the state of that situation, and then the meta state, or the metastructure of that situation. But here's the point. What we can also do is make that state a new situation, right? And then we can make the metastructure a new situation. And then by it being a new situation, what does it need? Well, it needs a state of the situation, and then it also would need a metastructure, a state of the situation, right? This is why he makes that point that everything is doubly presented, right? Because it's not just its power set, but also the power set of the power set that removes the possibility of the void. And, I mean, this is even true for the void, right? Let me find the workingest one we've got. Okay, actually, I'm going to leave that. Okay, here's our situation. What do we have? Well, we have a void. But of course, this is a problem, because what that would entail is that we would have the consistency of the inconsistency, or the presentable of the unpresentable. So this is the problem, because this is unpresentation as such, right? This is not simply the inclusion of the void. This is itself. The entire situation is unpresentable. And does everyone understand why that would be, right? Because it's just pure void. Okay, so let's take the state of it. Which actually, I mean, what we can do is we get two things. We get the power set. Let's call it situation A. Becomes the power set of A. More. Okay. But what you'll notice, though, is we've still got the void as such, right? And so we still have this errancy of the void because this is still included in this, or this is still part of, yes, still part, or this still belongs to the situation.